this session is being recorded. This is our session on social work as a profession, as well as social justice. Again, my name is Yosha Dotson. I am the Graduate Recruitment Coordinator for the MSW and PhD program here at the University of Georgia. We are glad that you all have decided to join us today. We're hoping to give you some really great information as it relates to our program and primarily the field of social work just in general. This again is being recorded. This again is being recorded. We have some guests that are here with us to answer questions. I will do a very brief presentation and then we will introduce our guests and open up for some discussion so that they can answer your questions. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Let me share my screen here. All right, and you can see the presentation, correct? Yep, I see nods, thank you. All right, just a little bit about today. Again, we are recording this session. If everyone could please make sure that your mic is muted, we'd be greatly appreciative of that. We want to be mindful also of your background. If you do have your camera on, if there's a lot going on in your background, so that we make sure that others are able to give their undivided attention, if you could please turn your camera off to help limit distractions, that would be very helpful for us. And then if you are the type that needs to be able to write your question down right away, please feel free to use the chat box so that we can make sure that your questions are answered. We have a guest panel today that includes Dr. Javier Boyas. He's an associate professor here at the School of Social Work. It includes Dr. Jane McPherson, who is an associate professor and also our director of global engagement. Dr. Llewellyn Cornelius, who is an associate professor. He's also our Donald L. Hallowell Distinguished Professor, as well as the director of the Center for Social Justice, Human and Civil Rights. And we also have Dr. Kate Morrissey Stahl with us, who is a clinical assistant professor, as well as the behavioral health program coordinator. Thank you all so much for joining us. I'm gonna give in just a second them the opportunity to introduce themselves, and you'll get to ask all of your questions to them. So they're going to be with us for just a little while today. We want to be able to talk a bit about the social work as a profession. Some of the things that we'll talk about and mention will include the core principles of social work, what that means and what that looks like. We'll also talk about I'm sure they'll talk a good bit today about the code of ethics and how that relates to social work and social justice. The importance of human relationships. You'll hear things like person and environment. Social work is a profession that goes across everything from individuals all of the way to communities and policy work. And so we'll have an opportunity to ask some questions about that today. You will also, you can't see my slides, I think. Bear with me. Let me make sure we're in the right place.
Yosha, we see the slides, it's just the presentation wasn't started, so we just see them laid out instead of in presentation form.
Let me try to share it again in a different way. Thank you, Dr. McPherson. Now, can you see my core principles? Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. So again, we'll talk a bit about the core principles of the profession, and our guest here, our guest panelists, will talk to you about what the core principles are and how it relates to social justice. we'll talk a bit about, we have some questions that will relate to career opportunities. What do careers in social work look like? What might you do if you have an interest in individuals, and how do you take that interest and help, right, with advocacy work, and what does that look like? These are the types of questions that we get a lot of. I'll give you first, though, just a little bit about us as a university. UGA is ranked the 15th as in the best public universities. The School of Social Work is often amongst the top 15 to 20 as it relates to schools, public institutions in the country. We are accredited, fully accredited by the Council on Social Work Education. That is our governing board and the governing body that says this school can teach social work and does it well. And again, and I mentioned the code of ethics, we also abide by the code of ethics. There is a national standard for our code of ethics that comes out of the National Association of Social Workers, and we abide by that code of ethics here at the School of Social Work. One of the other things that is amazing about the School of Social Work, and I'm a little biased because I also was a student in the program, but one of the things that is amazing about the School of Social Work is the opportunity to have faculty with such varied and diverse interests in research. You being at the School of Social Work here means that you then have access to professionals who are doing the work, and a lot of them on the cutting edge of the work in social work, so that you can see how it relates, understand how whatever your topic or interest correlates and even intersects with other interests. You have access to that faculty to be able to engage with them, network with them, and ask them all types of questions. So that is definitely a perk. You can find if you haven't had an opportunity, you can find our faculty on our School of Social Work page under people. Each of them has a bio that is written and talks about what their research interests are. We also put out a couple of publications each year so that you can delve into and see what those interests look like in real time. Those are the Social Justice Wanted magazine and our research review. One other thing that I wanted to share is that we do offer here in our MSW program 3 different options in order to join the program. We have our full-time program, which is on our Athens campus. It's 4 semesters, which is 2 years long, and it offers the opportunity for you to gain your degree and participate in other types of, say, dual degree options and certificate programs, etc., in a 2-year format. Again, that is the full-time program. Classes are offered during the day. Our extended time program is offered on our Gwinnett campus, which is in the metro Atlanta area. It's 8 semesters. And again, you do have the option of certain certificate programs, etc. And then we have a new online program that, like our extended time program, is 8 semesters long. It is offered online only. Your field placement is in person, and the thing about your field placement is that you are required to do that field placement within the state of Georgia. So while some other online programs offer you the opportunity to be anywhere in the country, because of our connections and how we do and are very hands-on with our field placement, because it's a part of our chief pedagogy, we do require you be able to complete that in the state of Georgia. So again, without any further ado, I will ask that our panelists come forward and tell us just a little about yourself. And we'll go in this order here. Dr. Boyas, Dr. McPherson, Dr. Cornelius, and Dr. Morrissey Stahl. Our focus today is on social work as a profession. It is on social work as a career, how social justice relates, and how UGA plays into that role in training social workers. Dr. Boyas, can you come forward and introduce yourself, please? And then tell us just a little bit about social work and how you became or joined the profession.
Sure. First of all, thank you for putting this event together, Yosha, and thank you for the introduction. Hopefully this will give students an opportunity to get to know a little bit about us. Faculty will be in the program teaching them different courses. But as you mentioned earlier, I am an associate professor here in the School of Social Work. My research interests lie in preventing and ultimately eradicating health and mental health disparities among populations of color, in particular Latinx populations. One of the things that for me drew me to the profession was this understanding that as a code of ethics, and what the code calls for is for social workers to actually ensure that there is an equal distribution of resources across the board, and that any policy, public or private, that we can challenge any policy that is unjust. And that's important to think about, because if you look at the different circumstances that continue to plague different populations in this country, particularly marginalized populations, it seems like equity and resources are not something that are afforded to them, which can translate into lack of access into necessary services, potentially establishing a gap in what they need. So for me, that was a very important piece as I was looking into what sort of areas and what professions I wanted to explore after college, because I wasn't a social work undergraduate. My area of study as an undergraduate was in sociology, medical sociology in particular. So as I was thinking about that next step, I was thinking really about what is it that I can do to engage in addressing the distribution of unequal resources. Where can I actually make a difference in creating the footprint to address unjust policies? And this ultimately became that area for me, because this is exactly what we're charged to do in the code of ethics, is think about how we can contribute to addressing these needs. And for me, that was key. So I would say those two areas in particular really sort of drove my passion and brought me here. So I teach social research methods. I teach issues of diversity here at the school. And I definitely look forward to hearing more about the interest that some of you have today. So by all means, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I will now turn the platform over to Dr. McPherson. Thank you very much for coming today.
Well, hi, everybody. Thank you, Javier. So I'm really glad you're here. I hope and think you're in the right place. Social work has been the right place for me for the past 35 years. I became a social worker by accident. When I graduated college and looked for work, you did it in the newspaper, and I applied for a job, but once I arrived at my job, and I was then working at the Department of Social Services and Child Protection in Massachusetts, I realized immediately that I had entered a field that was so complex and but also would open a door to who we are as a country, and who we are as a people. And I was really hooked. If you have had a chance to work in child protection or in many areas of public kinds of social work, you'll see that people who live in poverty are treated differently from people who do not live in poverty. And that has been kind of a central problem for me in my life in social work. But anyway, I started there, and I continue to be interested in these kinds of disparities and also furious about them. I think social work is an excellent place if you're someone who wants to be furious about social injustice, but also wants to do something about it. It's a slow road, but it's a really good place. I mean, so I was a social worker for 20 some years in practice before I got my PhD. I've worked mostly with women and children who are living in poverty, and helping them access their rights. My area of both activism and scholarship is in the area of human rights, and being aware of how social workers can promote human rights and how social workers must not prevent people from accessing their human rights, and also what we can do to move human rights forward in this country. So that's where I sit. Yosha was talking about the code of ethics, and I've my whole career been, kind of wrapped in the code of ethics. I feel like it is the aspect of social work that gives us a superhero. It's what sets us apart from some of the other mental health professions, because we're not just helping people for this moment. We're really trying to change the circumstances and make life more just for people who are experiencing consequences of injustice in the society. And I'm also global director, so I do a lot of work internationally. I collaborate with colleagues and students around the world, and I'm always happy to meet others who are interested in that. So anyway, welcome. It's just a profession and an opportunity that will allow you to be curious and engaged your whole life.
Thank you, Dr. McPherson. Dr. Cornelius.
Thank you, and thank you. Wow, it's exciting to be with all of you here on the panel, including fellow collaborators and kindred spirits. You kind of notice there's a common theme that you're picking up, that our institution is committed to this type of fabric, which, as we make a footnote, one of the realities is that we don't find as much of a drill down that you're seeing here in institutions across the United States. That's actually one of those curious sidebars. I grew up in a POW community, a multicultural POW community, actually in El Barrio, in Spanish Harlem. And so a lot of my family and community roots, even before I knew the word social work, happened every day in the family, in the community. Always wanted to be in a helping profession. Originally, I wanted to go into psychology. Did a double major in psych and sociology. Then I came to grad school, and actually, I knew I was convicted about going into social work. And that was an interesting conversation, because I was at a place where one could have easily gone into a discipline to print money, which made me a pain in the butt with other folk when they asked me why I was going into social work, and my response was more like none ya, as in none your business. So even when I was in grad school, and you know how that is, I wanted to do all this, and yeah, this is cool, but I could probably be lucky if I can get around the block on a bus or a train then. And so while my spirit was there, I didn't have like the experience set. Yet two things that were pivotal early on. One was the whole space around equity. That was a part of my early career. So a lot of the stuff about equity and empowerment and so on and so forth was just second nature. And just the other space about that was just the commitment to working in communities and around communities. And the empowerment-based practice was a fringe concept when I was getting started, but it's now mainstream. And we used concepts of empowerment as part of a practice regime, in micro practice and macro practice. So it's really neat to watch how it moved from being something only happening in a couple universities to everyday things as part of what you all get exposed to. I have a couple of various and sundry titles, and I think the best way to say it, the work that I'm doing now and will do when I'm not working full-time, is I will continue to be the good troublemaker. And my conviction is that some of these things are long-term. I knew that as a kid, I know that now. And so my commitment to the work that we do is not just what we're sharing with you, is what you get to share with your kids and grandkids, because some of these transformational activities will be occurring down the road. And I believe that my dear colleague, Professor Kate Morrissey Stahl, is the next person up, if I'm right. And so she's gonna just pick up right where I'm standing, so to speak.
That is right. Thank you. Distinguished Professor of, oh, I won't be able to remember all the titles. Dr. C. Thanks again for being here, everybody. And I'm rounding things up to talk a little bit about the clinical side of things. I didn't start my life in the clinical side of things. I started being interested in social work because I grew up with foster siblings, and I'm from South Dakota. And so it got me interested in tribal governance, relationships, racial justice in South Dakota, these things. And so eventually I studied communication, and I taught communication for a while. I taught civic engagement and public speaking at the University of Georgia and Athens Tech and in Pennsylvania. And I wanted more applied work. So I came back and got my MSW after some years of that. And now I've done lots of specializing in doing clinical work. I teach clinical classes, and I'm sort of a in the wild person who's working out in the world in addition to doing some sort of like pedagogical research. So what I do mostly now is sex therapy. And so I study human sexuality from different dimensions. My research was on sex and aging. I'm also really curious about somatic approaches to trauma. I own a donation-based yoga studio, which is also a sex therapy practice in Athens. And we do trauma-sensitive yoga, smaller groups, things like that. And I teach, this semester, I'm teaching the trauma, one of the trauma classes that's happening. So I'm really interested in those things. I like and am interested in behavioral interventions, so evidence-based approaches to a range of questions, and then how that balances out with more community healing approaches. And so we talk about that a lot in the trauma class. And then I'm heading up right now a grant that we have with basically community mental health to make sure that folks go into community mental health, making behavioral health more accessible, have good training so that people don't burn out, they're ready for it, they enter the field excited and really clear about how important it is. So lately, I am up to that clinically. I love the School of Social Work at UGA, and my colleagues are wonderful. I learn something every day. People are available to talk to and learn from. So I think it's lovely. And I also really honor the field of social work. I studied in social work and not another field because I came out of civic engagement, and I thought it was really important that I get additional training in policy so that we were looking at, like, how do we talk about social justice without talking about the Supreme Court right now, and sexual justice, right? Reproductive justice. So I don't know. I think it's really valuable for clinicians, even if the work you want to do is completely clinical. I think it's really important that we have this contextual education if we are going to approach even micro work in a socially just way. So I'm passionate about that. And I'm passionate about your questions. So I'll pass the ball out to the audience so that we can get to what you're curious about.
Thank you, Dr. Morrissey Stahl. And that invitation is open. Maybe I'll kick it off with a question that we received from our participants. Again, if you can't turn your camera on, if you can't unmute, please feel free to use the chat box. Someone said, I would love to know more about how clinical social work and mental health counseling relate to social justice. I think that's a great question. Most times we can clearly see how the macro, right, and community and policy work relate. But if you all want to start there, we can.
In the trauma class right now, we're reading My Grandmother's Hands, which you may have read by Menachem, who does a lot of body-based somatic sort of cultural trauma work. And so I think that one answer to that question is that we have a lot of cultural trauma that we're carrying around, and the personal is political, and we have to work on multiple levels. So one of his sort of missions is to work with law enforcement and with people who have experienced racial trauma, and that's everybody, by the way, in our country, and so that people can be more aware of their body, responsive rather than reactive, these other things, so that while we're also changing the systems and challenging the system, we are tending to our own nervous systems and our own health. So I think that they overlap in a lot of different ways. And how do people enter the struggle and maintain the energy for the struggle? Sometimes it's through micro work. Sometimes it's through being reminded through individual support that it's worthwhile work to go back out and keep doing it. So, you know, all of it doesn't happen in large groups. Some things happen in smaller rooms, some things happen in larger groups. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I would add to that also. I've certainly been on both sides of the micro macro divide. And I think it's really important for mental health professionals to, I mean, I'm always thrilled when somebody who wants to do real mental health comes through a social work program and gets our social justice lens, because mental health practitioners, we can do damage. If we are not aware of people's, of their structural barriers, and we blame people for those as if they were personal barriers, we can do a tremendous amount of harm. And in the same way, I think as when we are aware of these things, we can also, you know, empower people in real ways, both personally and politically in that micro space. So great question, Dr. C.
Yeah, and to add to what my colleagues are saying, one of the things I do within the classroom space is the focus on the whole issue of empowerment within a clinical practice, in particular dealing with the power of us as therapists and what does that mean in the dynamics on a one-on-one basis. Second, how do we help our clients understand social support bridges outside of the session and affinity groups in order to help them with the healing process? In other words, to take these principles that we talk about with empowerment and understand that it is just as viable when we're working one-on-one in dealing with the clients in that space, and also the notion of self-determination within clinical practice, of saying that, guess what, if we're doing empowerment-based practice, you are the driver, not me as the therapist trying to take you someplace. And it creates some very fascinating things that happen, because your space is how are you listening to and identifying the power within that client as opposed to what we do. And actually, one of the hardest things that we have to deal with as us as professionals is sallying into a clinical space as though we got the aha, when the aha might actually be within the client.
Dr. C, if I could also add, you know, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that we're charged with that relates to the code of ethics that sort of puts us at that nexus of social work, social justice, is understanding the gaps in access to services. One of the things we know that there are various populations in this country who don't have adequate service to mental health treatment. And if you can't get treated, then the needs go unmet. And obviously we know that that can have adverse consequences for folks. But you know, if you think about the fact that you can be that lifeline for someone, but you may not even get to that point because someone may not have access to care, that becomes a huge barrier, and that is structural versus personal. So I think one of the things that you get here at the School of Social Work is the understanding that you can't separate social justice and social work, that they both sort of reinforce one another in the work that we're expected to carry out.
Thank you. There's a question in the chat. Are any of your faculty members trained as psychoanalysts and or support a psychodynamic approach in the clinic? Thoughts? Dr. Boyas, there's a share, please.
We don't have a lot of folks that are invested in psychodynamics, although we do have, I believe, we do have one person who does actually support and engages in that type of work. Dr. Elkins is someone that has been trained in that area. So I know she does that. I don't know too many folks that do, but I wouldn't necessarily see that as a detriment. Having one person that you can resort to that provides that type of training. We do have that here, but I wouldn't say we have that largely among our faculty.
Yeah, I think when people are interested in psychodynamic approaches, they learn more about it in the field. So Dr. Hawkins kind of comes from like an object relations trauma sort of perspective. So a version of psychodynamic approaches, and people learn about an overview of psychodynamic approaches in a class advanced practice with individuals, but nobody's fully trained as a psychoanalyst. I don't even know if there is a fully trained psychoanalyst in town, but I do know that the clinical director at Advantage, which is our community health center, got her PhD in Lacanian psychoanalytical approaches in Pennsylvania. It's a college that starts with a D, don't remember.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in the field, do you know it, Jane?
You know, as Emory is definitely still training people in psychodynamic approaches, but at the psychoanalytic level, so post-master's level. And I'd go with I actually have that kind of training, but at the master's level, not in. So I don't think none of us. This is all to say that none of us is a psychodynamic therapist. Many of us have some training in that area, but that. Certainly to get advanced training in that area, you would need to go beyond the School of Social Work.
Thank you. Here's a question. What are the differences and opportunities for people with a BSW and those with an MSW? And I want to flip it just slightly. Because you don't need a BSW to come into the school to get your master's. Can we talk about what opportunities a master's of social work opens up for you? Can we answer that question?
Yes, I'm enthusiastic about these questions. So I'll jump in with this one to say that I had a master's degree already in communication. And when I was applying to jobs that sounded interesting, I had worked in a crisis line and I knew I wanted to do more applied work. And as I was applying at hospices, as I was applying basically in human services field, I kept getting the feedback, you should get a license and be able to sort of apply this. So a major thing that your master's does is make it possible to get licensed as a social worker by the state, which helps a lot with billing, being able to bill insurance, and so being able to make services accessible. So for me, I couldn't have made the step into clinical work that I did without getting some kind of a license. And the social work license is one of the most versatile licenses you can get. There are things that social workers can do with their licenses that LPCs cannot do, licensed professional counselors can't do, and marriage and family therapists can't do. And that's, I think, because we have good lobbyists and we've been around for a while. So it's a really valuable license that opens up through the MSW.
Yeah, one of the things that I've witnessed, my area in social work is healthcare, and I witnessed both here and where I was in Maryland, folk going into the community health, the hospitals, and the VA system as a result of being practitioners and interns in social work, and also and that on the practice level, as well as some of the people that we have who are doing MSW and MPH. I have a former student of mine who's now at CDC, at the Centers for Disease Control, doing actually policy research for CDC. One of the things that's true about social work, I've always remembered that because the broad-based training that you have, across your career, you could end up working in 8 different things over 15 to 20 years because you're trained to do that. And so I always laugh, I was in a program that just uploaded so many specializations and concentrations, our head would just get dizzy with all that. And I said, oh, stop that. The reality is, once you have this training, where you start in social work, whether it's at the baccalaureate level, the master's level, does not mean that that's what you're doing 4 or 5 years from now. A lot of it, like for example, a lot of frontline practitioners move up to supervision. They may not have gone into the field to do supervision, but here they are.
And I'll just end it by saying that the versatility is really what makes this degree unique. It's very hard to outgrow an MSW. So you can start out with doing work in the clinical realm with children and youth, but later on maybe move into administration as it relates to programming for older adults or specific populations, the versatility of this degree allows you to actually move within those spaces seamlessly without you having to think about having to come back to school for further training. So that, I think, is one of the amazing pieces of being an MSW. And the other part is, and Kate talked about this already, but it's worth, I think, reiterating, in many states, you cannot sit for a clinical exam without an MSW. So that puts this degree ahead of the LPC or the counseling degrees that are out there.
And I will add to that, thank you all. I will add to that here, there are also ways to help expand your MSW when you come here. Again, we have certificate offerings with MFT. There's certificate offerings for substance use counseling. It's the only one in the state. There are opportunities for study away. There are opportunities for dual degrees with a JD or MDiv. So there are ways to be able to help tailor and enhance your MSW degree as well. There's a question in the chat that says, expound on this. What are the benefits of continuing on to a PhD, which all of you have done? So can you expound on that a bit as well?
Let me dive in quickly. I taught in the PhD program here in Maryland. Actually, I want to split this out and talk about DSW and also talk about PhD, separate from our conversation about MSW. First, DSW. The better way to say this for the sake of time is the contemporary way that we talk about DSW programs, because it originally existed before, but where it pivots now is that there are universities that think of it as an advanced practice program that's intensive, that is directly petitioning to persons who are out there in the field and want to get an advanced practice degree. The majority of our programs on the doctoral level in social work, though, are PhD, which is primarily focusing on research and teaching, and you'll also have some that go into administration. Yet it's interesting, in our program, when we talk to the doctoral students, we actually sit down with them and help them understand that there are several tracks of where you can end up based upon your training. Yet, like you would notice in the University of Maryland's program, it's a very research intensive program where people learn about quantitative methods. We're also a very teaching practicum focused program where we are just as convicted about helping our students become exemplary teachers. So that opens up the space for what people do, yet think of it as in another phase of your progression based upon your life journey.
I guess I'll just jump in too and say that, I think I can't speak for everyone, but at least for the panelists today, one of the things that I think most of us share is this passion for wanting to be in the health profession, and we want to help folks. One of the things that I found that, in addition to being someone who can work on the front line of being a mental health practitioner or even serving as a community organizer, one of the ways in which you can have a big impact too, helping populations and maybe more broadly, but is delving into the knowledge creation portion of our understanding of different issues. That was one of the things for me that propelled me into a PhD program, is the understanding that I now can contribute to knowledge creation. In addition to the work that I've done, I can also get into the sphere of helping people understand where knowledge comes from through my lens as a researcher and as a person of color and as a male of color in particular. So I think you can actually use knowledge in a way that liberates folks in helping people see just what we see, at least what I see as a researcher. But knowledge creation and participation in that sphere can be also very impactful, especially if you consider the fact that knowledge has been used in many ways to isolate and marginalize different populations, So for me, getting a PhD was a way to combat that and ensure that real knowledge comes from folks that really have understandings of some of these communities out there that have largely been overlooked in our research, so in our creation of knowledge. So you too can participate in that sphere of creating knowledge, because it is going to have a significant impact in how people view populations and certainly the issues that impact those populations.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. McPherson?
Yeah, so my own journey from MSW to PhD was very organic. And so if those of you who are going to join us with MSW, you know, I started working and then I started learning some things. So then I started supervising others, and then I started teaching as an adjunct, because as I learned and I saw things in the field that I really wanted to, you know, pass on to students, I started to want to really shape the field as it was. So I started teaching as an adjunct, and then in my own experience, I started working with some people who had survived trafficking. That introduced me into human rights. And I realized, oh, I don't know anything about this relationship between human rights and social work. And I started looking into it, and I realized that most other people didn't either. And I thought, okay, here's an opportunity for me. Like, I don't know this, and this is something I could explore, and this is worth a PhD. This is worth me, you know, learning something. So then, you know, I ended up on this other whole road of where now I'm mostly a scholar, speaker, and trainer around that. So it's really, but again, as we've said all along, and one of the things about an MSW is that it's this wonderful, flexible career that allows you to do many things over the course of a long career and lifetime.
Thank you. Other questions? These are great questions. Other questions? Don't be shy, speak up.
You know, I was curious, thank y'all so much, by the way, but I was curious, once you're on a track, is there any ability to shift tracks at any point, or are you kind of set to that one? And then I was also curious if you could talk about graduate assistantships and if those opportunities exist for students.
Dr. Boyas, would you like to answer any of those questions?
Yeah. I'll take both, and certainly others can chime in. But yes, to address the first part of your question, you know, once you come to the school, you have an opportunity to sort of state what specialization area you hope to get into. However, you're not married to that. I would say once you come into the program, you probably have one semester to be able to pick out a specialization that really suits you, in part because your internship has a lot to do with your area of specialization, and that part begins to unfold for your specialization area or your second year at the end of the first semester. So it's important at that point to really have a good idea of what area you want to pursue, so that your internship is in line with your area of specialization. So I would say you probably have one semester to really make that decision, if this is really the area that you want to pursue, based on what you initially put down on your application. So there is some time for you to get a broader understanding of the field of social work, and you probably will have at least one semester to let that sit in your head and percolate and determine if that's the route you want to pursue. So there is time, but not a lot of time. To address your second question, we do have graduate assistantships at the School of Social Work. I can tell you in years past, we've supported at least 30% of our MSW students in its entirety. So graduate assistantships are available. You can learn about the different opportunities online. I would encourage all of you, if you're interested in pursuing a graduate assistantship, that you start that process when you apply. There is an opportunity for you to directly apply for a graduate assistantship when you actually complete your application online. Our package is pretty generous. I think this year our stipend for students is $12,000 plus for the academic year. That includes health insurance, which continues to be an issue of access for a lot of folks. And in return for the stipend, you're expected to work anywhere between 13 and 20 hours on a weekly basis. So I think it's pretty generous in terms of what you're expected to do versus what we pay you for in the form of a graduate assistantship. And that also brings your tuition down, by the way, to hefty $25 in total. So we don't call it necessarily tuition waiver, but I can tell you that significantly reduces what you would have to pay. So you get a monthly stipend of whatever, it gets broken down by 9 months, but in addition to that, your tuition bill actually is significantly reduced. So it's definitely worth pursuing. So of course it is competitive, so we can't support everyone, but I would say if you're interested in learning more about the graduate assistantships, you can learn more about them on our website, but we also have other programs such as the program that Dr. Morrissey Stahl runs, the BBHDD program, once you're here as a specialization year student. That mechanism in particular provides a $10,000 stipend, as does another mechanism that we have for training our next workforce in the area of substance use. That also pays $10,000 in the form of a stipend. So, and we also have school scholarships. So in addition to the graduate assistantship, we also have other means by which you can explore for earning some funding that can support your development as an MSW student.
Thank you, Dr. Boyas. And I picked on you because I know you were our program director and you knew the answers to those questions. I would like to
interrupt for a second though, Yosha, just,
Mhm.
I'm going to continue to put a plug in for flexibility, because if, for example, you decide, perhaps you went micro or went really macro, and then you decide you want micro and you still want to get a license, you can, you can take classes online, you can fix this stuff later. Like, it's not ideal, but it's definitely possible. Once you have an MSW, people are not asking you what kind of classes you took. It does matter for licensure, but in general, you are absolutely, once you have your MSW, it's a license to drive across the areas in which we practice.
And I was going, thank you, Dr. McPherson. And the other thing that I was going to say is, whereas some schools require you to get on a track and, if you say I want children and youth or something of that nature, you are on that track and you take all classes about that. I think the degree here allows you to learn the skills, which can translate into other areas. The other thing is we also have not just micro and not just macro, but we also have a combined option so that you can take and keep one foot on each side, right? That gives you some flexibility as well whenever you're choosing and thinking about a career. I do see one other question, and I want us to be able to answer it. How does the work of anti-racism show up in your curricula and field placements?
Well, we do have an overarching framework that guides the MSW curriculum that we call PROCEED. PROCEED is an acronym. Here's going to be the struggle now of getting every word, the meaning for every word. But basically, the framework itself really brings to light some of those issues that we confront out in the field around equity, diversity, and inclusion. So basically what we expect is that students will take a course on these topics that is called PROCEED in that first generalist year, but we also have built a curriculum where students, regardless of the courses, once they leave that course in particular, will get introduced to these concepts in a different space, whether it be in the area of policy, in the area of practice, both interpersonal practice or macro level practice, that these constructs are actually going to live beyond that one course that you take in your first year. So we've built our curriculum with a lot of those ideas in mind, a lot of those concepts of being anti-racist, of being more inclusive. So what you'll get here really is a sort of broader understanding of how these things live in direct practice. So students can expect that to be a significant piece of their training here at the school. And we also do train our field instructors to think about those constructs as well. That has been one of the things that I think our field folks come to understand is this framework that guides the academic academic component of our education, but also given that field is our signature pedagogy, that those concepts also spill into that area, given that it's going to be expected that you go out and put a lot of this stuff that you're learning in the classroom into practice via your field placement. So that too spills into that area as well. And I would say that's probably one of the defining features of our program that is unique to social work education is our intentionality around being inclusive and appreciating diversity and celebrating.
Yeah, and working to incorporate it in all of our classes across the curriculum. And we also have a really wonderfully diverse and well-trained in anti-racism faculty. And so I think you can find lots of leaders in the faculty. In addition to really in the student body, we get amazing students too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. McPherson, I see the thumbs up. Did you have anything to add?
No, I think we do get amazing students, and I think we take a lot of leadership from the students and really appreciate how you all, should you come here, will help us move forward.
Thank you. Other questions, thoughts? Anything else?
I think one thought that I would just have for all of you who are here, I would, if you're interested in certain areas, I would absolutely recommend looking through the list of faculty, reaching out to people, reaching out to current students for certain specific areas of interest. That's something that Yosha can potentially do for you. You know, coming over here and checking us out, walking around. It's a little weirder in COVID times. There are a few of us and we're all masked. We are a very mask forward building and space. So I definitely encourage you to keep doing what you're doing, of exploring and reaching out and finding out if we would be a good fit for what you want to do and who you want to be.
Yeah, thank you. There was one other question from I don't see a name. It says iPhone. Did you have a question? No? Okay. Dr. Boyas, Dr. Morrissey Stahl, any final thoughts or final words for us?
I would just say, you know, we're a dynamic school. We are trying to be responsive to the needs of our students, but also the needs of our community. If you're looking for a program that continually seeks to address and ensure that the curriculum is relevant to the needs, I'd say that this is that curriculum, this is that faculty, and this is the school. I think we try to be conscious of that. We know that social problems evolve, knowledge evolves, and I just like to think that our faculty are committed to being on the cusp of that. So I would say if you're looking for a progressive program, we have one here. Hope you all join us.
And I appreciate y'all being here, and I want to honor your work, Yosha, in gathering us together, because these are always really interesting and rich.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
For sure. Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us. Again, it is overwhelming to me how much the faculty is so supportive of these efforts, and they really do engage and want the students, our potential students, to have all of the information that they can. I am going to stay on for just a few more moments if there are any other questions that students might have. I want to again thank our panel. Thank you very much for all of the information, for joining us today. Have a wonderful day and evening. Again, I will be on for just a few more moments if anyone wants to have additional questions, but thanks and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye,
Have a
all.
good rest of the time.